Hi, we're currently exploring ways to reparent our inner child and maybe use those very same principles for educating our own children or the next generation. We've been looking at 12 passages, the first of 12 passages that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said one should teach children. And today we come to the next passage, which in Hebrew begins Ki Korov. In English it reads as follows: "For this thing," the Torah, the mitzvahs, fearing God, "is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it." Now this verse from the Torah is actually the mission statement of the seminal Chabad text by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi called Tanya. It's right there on the opening page where he states that the purpose of the book is to explain this verse. And he then goes on to spend 53 chapters trying to explain how one could say that this is very close to you. It seems counterintuitive. Who of us would say, yeah, no problem, I can fear God, I can love God, I can walk in his ways and keep every one of the mitzvahs. It's just so easy to do. I don't think you'd find a person in the world who's ready to say that. And yet God tells us through Moses, this thing is very close to you. It's easy for you to do in your mouth and in your heart to do it. So what does it actually mean? The Alter Rebbe explains as follows. He says all of us have an inner world. And in our inner world, we might struggle. In fact, the high probability is that we're going to struggle and struggle a lot. We all have darkness. We all have a lower self that comes forth and says, well, what do you want to do that for? Or pushes us to be selfish, arrogant, pursue physical pleasure rather than pursue the truth. And that's challenging. However, what God really wants of us is to do it in your mouth, through speech, in your heart, which is affected by your consciousness with your thought, and to do it in action. There you have the power of choice. You have freedom and control. And what God wants of us is this. Each of us must know, in my inner world, I am compromised, I'm flawed, I have my own darkness. But when it comes to how I manifest in the outside world, there I have both the ability and the obligation to serve God in a perfect way. That is perfection for the average person, meaning you are an imperfect person, but that doesn't mean that you can't live a very whole and real life, a perfect life, and that you can't take part in perfecting the world. So when it comes to our inner world, there's very little freedom. You're going to be a person who is either intellectual or emotional, an extrovert and introvert, someone who's more connected to action, or someone who's more connected to the realm of abstraction and thought. Are you loving, or are you someone who is more severe, connected to awe or respect? Do you give? Do you withhold? That's something that you're born with. And we struggle with that, but it's very unlikely that any of us are actually going to change that until the coming of Mashiach. What we can control is, how do I manifest in the outer world? And that is through the garments, the Alter Rebbe explains, of thought, speech, and action. These are not inner soul abilities. They're not powers that my soul has. These are garments in the sense that as I can take an item of clothing off or put it on, so too I can choose what to wear spiritually. I can choose at any given moment to think a negative thought or a positive and holy thought. And if a negative thought arises in my mind, I'm not responsible for that impulse, but what I am responsible for is what I do the very instant that I become aware that I've had that thought. I have to exchange it, override it. Do I want to keep that? Do I want to download that thought? Or do I want to override it? And the same thing applies to speech. You can't say two things simultaneously. Although maybe with tone you can imply something very opposite from what you're saying. That's sarcasm, right? But I can only speak in one way or say one thing at any given moment. And I have that choice. What garment am I going to wear? Am I going to clothe my lower self and speak in a horrible way, slander about someone, God forbid, or even just gossip about another person? Or am I going to speak in a respectful way of another person? Am I going to speak words of Torah and prayer? And then when it comes to action, the same thing applies. Are you going to write the check to charity, light the candle, wrap the tefillin, or are you going to use your hands for something else that is not in accordance with the will of God? And the Alter Rebbe tells us, Ki karov elecha, this thing is very near to you, means you don't have to deal with transforming your inner world. Maybe you were born to have that struggle. What you are born with is the mission, the obligation, and the accountability to live a perfect life in the realm of the garments, the outside dimensions of your soul. So when we come to reparenting our inner child, this really gives us a sense of freedom and accountability. I don't have to give in to the fact that inside I'm feeling down. I have struggles. I have all of this negativity. So what? Yes, I have it over there. But maybe that's why I was created. Maybe I was created to resist this negativity and manifest in the world in a positive way. I have true freedom of choice, and I can make a difference to the world through the way I think, speak, and act. And we are encouraged, exchange a victim mentality where you see yourself as a victim of your own inner circumstances, your life circumstances, the family you grew up with, the culture you live in, and your inner world. Exchange that victim mentality for one of empowerment. I don't have to buy into the fact that I have negativity inside. I can live with that truth. Yes, it's certainly true, but in no way is that going to impact the way I put myself out there in the world.